Hello. Today I will be posting my power rankings of the Overwatch League now that we've seen them in the Summer Showdown. I am not going to be splitting the rankings up by region like last time, either. Let's get started. Number 20. The Los Angeles Valiant. I had difficulty placing Los Angeles over Vancouver, however, my decision came down to the fact that the Los Angeles Valiant have won only a whopping 2 maps this entire season. At least Vancouver were able to take some maps off decent teams early on in the season. Los Angeles has consistently looked terrible in every game this season. Molan has looked good, Anya has seemed decent, but everyone else on the team has looked pretty bad. They just seem outclassed in every way, on top of fairly dysfunctional teamwork. I would not be surprised if 2 maps ended up being the only maps they win all season. Number 19. Vancouver Titans. They have won a whopping 5 maps this whole season. Now, they have some bright spots. Turu and Dalton have their moments, and Changsik has looked pretty decent, but they're just outclassed in an ever-increasingly competitive North American scene. These budget teams that were made to fail are honestly depressing to watch. Hopefully their OGs can put some effort into team building next time, but I wouldn't be surprised if they stayed the same. Number 18. Florida Mayhem. This somewhat assumes that Florida will continue with the checkmate main tank experiment, but I've seen no evidence that they will change that anytime soon. However, the team seems to be dysfunctional even without the main tank situation. Their head coach has said that OGE wasn't even the main issue. But as to why they are worse than London, they have better individual pieces, I absolutely agree, but I don't think they are being utilized very well. The teamwork is fairly lacking, and the DPS seem to be trying to carry them through games at times, which hasn't really worked out. When Yaki can't play Tracer, he really is out of his league. It leads me to believe that they just lucked out with the good meta in the melee. And going into next tourney a total mess, with 3 of top 4 banned heroes being in the Mayhem's top 3 played, they are in for a massive heartbreak next stage. I don't even know if OGE can save them at this point, but it seems like there is some serious internal issues they need to sort out. Number 17. London Spitfire. Now, there is some good in them. Sparkran Shax has proved to be a fairly lethal DPS duo, and Molf1G and Ripper have had their moments, but Kalex and Haley really haven't seemed very good. On top of that, while these players I've talked about are good in their own right, they simply can't seem to stand up to the rest of their region outside of Vancouver and maybe Florida. I think there is a big gap in between 19 and 18. I also think they have potential to be better than Florida. The meta plays to London's strengths at the moment, with Molf1G being an actual decent ball, and Florida got absolutely destroyed by hero bans this time around. If Florida puts in OGE they will probably be better, but it'd likely be a close game. However, I think there is a massive gap between the bottom 3 teams in there and the rest of the teams in the region, and they likely don't have a chance at victory with any other team. Number 16. Guangzhou Charge. Guangzhou is a confusing team to me. They have great players on paper, but cannot manage to win a game without punching down. All playing New York. Eileen is consistently good, Rio and CR0NG aren't that bad of a tanklin, and Kariv, while not looking nearly as good as he used to, still plays fairly well. So what's the issue? Well, the main thing is that they are so goddamn slow. I think it's a coaching issue at that point. They take forever to set up, and then can barely engage properly unless Eileen starts carrying. That is pretty abysmal on their part, considering how aggressive they used to be. Hopefully they can get some quality wins in the future, but I don't see it happening unless Dive comes back into the meta, and it doesn't seem like that'll happen. Number 15. Toronto Defiant. I'd like to start this off by saying that Aspire is really fucking good. Also Michelle. Even Sado and Lastro have looked good. But again, they just seem outclassed. They are much more competent and skilled than the previous 5 teams, yet can't seem to get any quality wins. The only real upset they pulled was against Atlanta in Stage 1, but Atlanta was pretty shit in Stage 1. they just make questionable decisions in games and it costs them. While they are all but certainly going to be in play-ins, I can't imagine them going very far. Number 14. Philadelphia Fusion. How tragic. Many people put them as the number 2 team in the pack, including me. On paper, they still have one of the best rosters, with many past MVP caliber players like Carp, Eco, Alarm and Toby. So why are they this low? Well, a 3-1 Summer Showdown is how. Their only wins in the past 2 tournaments have been against Chengdu twice and the Los Angeles Valiant. It's quite the fall from grace, when they went 4-0 in Stage 1. Now, with a tough schedule in Stage 4 and them looking shaky, I honestly see them going 0-4 next stage. So what's the issue? Well, first of all they have zero flexibility. They are much like the Glads and the Rain, who are very good at a comp or two and seem shaky when forced off it, but unlike those two that have the skill to stick with it and win games, Philadelphia has been thrown into meters that prioritize wacky comps and chaos, and have seemed unsure of how to handle it in the past 2 tournaments. And I don't see that trend stopping. Plus, I pointed to the new players as a sign of hope, but it may have the opposite effect, where the synergy built up over the past 2 tourneys has been somewhat broken. The DPS hero pools also and that Deep, Carp, Eco and Shockwave all play fairly similar heroes. There isn't no hope for the Fusion, but honestly they may make it to the post-season play-ins by the skin of their teeth. 13. New York Excelsior. New York Excelsior has really leveled up recently, especially with Cleos. Their tanklane used to be their weak spot, but it is now fairly decent with Cleos in there, and they showed that by dominating the Philadelphia Fusion. And Jonake and Flora are as good as ever. I'm hoping with Cleos in there now, they can improve greatly and not rely quite as much on Flora carrying, but that remains to be seen. But other members have stepped it up. Gangbuong and Fi3R are looking pretty great. They still have some very exploitable weaknesses, but the days of Nixel being a joke team are over. They have potential to make it to knockouts for a 3rd time. Number 12. Boston Uprising. I'm honestly not as high on them as some people, but 12 seems like an appropriate spot after what they did to Houston. They frankly had unparalleled teamwork there, and worked almost perfectly, just simply shutting them out. The issue? They are very inconsistent. Other than Houston, they only seem to beat lower-level or struggling teams, and they pretty much get dominated by any other team. They were speed-ran by Los Angeles in the knockouts. That was just tragic. But it's undeniable that they have improved an incredible amount. My UMP0NG is a top 10 support in the league in my opinion. Their tanklane is consistently good and IM37 and Valentine absolutely fuck. I just don't think they quite reach the top 10 in my opinion, though. Number 11. Hangzhou Spark. Hangzhou. On paper one of my favorite teams, and they are still very good, but they don't seem to be as clutch in big moments as they should be. They seem to be unconfident against top-tier opponents like Shanghai and Seoul. But don't get it twisted, they are still insane. Shy and Kshu are consistently insane. Architect, Xiaomisu are still great and their supports aren't slouches either. If anything, it's a testament to how hard this league is to navigate that these guys are the team to beat to make top 10. I think they have a very good shot at going far, though, potentially even making playoffs. Number 10. Paris Eternal. They upgraded in nearly every way. If there was a Most Improved Team award, they would absolutely get it. They have impressed greatly, even taking Washington to a map 5. Hell, I still think it was winnable if they didn't sub in Sana, breaking the synergy. Onigod and Naga are straight dangerous, Ka and Amdan are amazing, even Drydrio and Vestola have their moments. I just don't think they're quite at the top level where they need to be quite yet. They absolutely have the potential to be, but they just can't seem to beat many top-tier teams despite playing them close. They definitely have great mental fortitude as shown against the Gladiators, but mental fortitude is not the same thing as clutch factor. Hopefully, they continue to improve. The meta doesn't seem to be changing, and they really pop off in this one. Here's to next tourney. Number 9. The San Francisco Shock. Tragic. The favorites to win the league are not 8 spots below where they should have been. I think they are overly hated on, despite what the competitive Overwatch Reddit wants you to think. They still have the best standings in the league other than the Fuel, and have shown clutch ability even against tough opponents in the regular season in the first 2 stages. However, ever since losing Striker they haven't looked the same. And just doesn't fit the striker-sized hole left in the Shock, and I swear that is not a fat joke. The support line has been lacking a bit as well. Vile 2T simply hasn't looked the same and Krusty seems unwilling to sub him out. However, there is some hope. Shock seemed unwilling to sub Inans at certain points, and I think that is due to him lacking the same synergy he built up, and I think they can have more trust in him going into the next tourney. And I know it seems weird that it's a good thing Lucio was banned since they love playing him, but since God will seemingly be benched, they might be able to build a more solid support line between Vile 2T and Twilight, which sounds like a great one in my opinion. But based on what we've seen, putting too much faith in the Shock can backfire. I cannot with confidence bet them any higher than 9. Number 8. Houston Outlaws. Houston seems to lack flexibility despite such a phenomenal roster. It was the main reason they lost to Boston, who more or less just ran over them. The second week after their win against the Shock was pretty unacceptable in my opinion, and shows the massive inconsistency in big moments they can show when they have their mentals challenged. And with Signal being banned, Piggy lost his best hero and they are in a very bad spot at the moment, especially considering their tough schedule. Now, I've been overly negative when I shouldn't be. They've consistently dominated the regular season and are currently 3rd in the standings, but honestly I'm not too high on them. If they didn't consistently beat the Shock, I'd say the Shock are higher. I'm not expecting them to make knockouts next time around either considering their schedule. Number 7. Washington Justice. Yeah, I know they did extremely well in the knockouts. I think at their peak, they are better than the Gladiators and maybe the Reign as well. The issue is their inconsistency. And yes, I know I talked about this about the Glads as well, but it really is like night and day at times. In the June joust they went from being dominated by Paris to dominating a still good Florida. In the summer showdown they went from being dominated by Atlanta to going 5 maps against the Fuel. It makes it difficult for me to trust them when they have slow starts like this during meta shifts. What happens when playoffs have a new meta, and they have a bad week during play-ins, and are out of playoffs altogether? This is probably the hottest take here, but I really can't trust them all that much. They have an extremely top-tier roster, though, and I don't think I need to explain that. The tanks are phenomenal. Decay is inconsistent, but when he's on he looks like the best DPS in the world, and the supports and other DPS are phenomenal as well. Just some trust issues, that's all. Number 6. Los Angeles Gladiators. Glads have impressed me this tourney, despite the reverse sweep against Paris, with strong showings against the Shock, Washington, Boston and Atlanta. I mean, come on, they were 1 round away from going to Hawaii. However, again consistency is the issue. They seem somewhat unwilling to swap to different comps, but when they are on their comp they seem almost unbeatable. This was on full display against Atlanta, where they seemed extremely uncomfortable forcing the ball comps, but very good on rush dive comps. I think they have a good chance of making Hawaii next time around, though despite the competition. Givster and Mirror are consistently insane, Space is a top 5 off-tank and Skewed, Moth and Shoe have all looked incredible. They just need to be a tiny bit more clutch before I can call them the second best in the. Number 5. Seoul Dynasty. Honestly maybe the team I trust the least here. They can look Shanghai Dragons level at times and then can go to map 5 against Chengdu. But I still feel justified putting them as the 5th best team in the league. Prophet and Fitz are a god-level DPS duo, they are crazy good at rush. Creative is one of the best Annas in the world, and Merv 1 and 2 have looked great even when gesture has been lacking. However, there are a few problems. One is the inconsistency. I think the team relies a bit too heavily on their DPS to carry. This was especially apparent against Chengdu, where they were getting destroyed until Prophet decided he didn't want to lose. They can also look rather messy at times. I think they are justifiably number 5 due to how close they consistently play Chengdu, but they really do worry me, and I would not be surprised if this came back to bite me. Number 4. Atlanta Reign. Easily the second best team in the. They consistently beat other top-tier competition aside from the fuel, and play the fuel incredibly close when they do lose. A common argument I hear about Atlanta is that their mentals aren't very strong, and that they only win when they sweep. First off, their Map 5 game has improved considerably, and 2, when you are sweeping teams like Boston, Shock and Washington, maybe that's not necessarily a bad team. Looking at their roster, they have one of the best DPS duos in Pelican, Essen and IR1S, a consistently great tank in Hawk and a bally support in Razor. Gator is a bit unflexible, but that only applies to dive heroes, which doesn't seem to be meta anytime soon. Overall, they do need to work on their mental game and clutch factor a bit, and be more organized, and I could honestly see them upsetting Dallas one of these days. 3. Chengdu Hunters. I know what your next line is. But Chengdu decisively beat Dallas twice in a row. How could they be better? Well, first off, I trust Dallas more. Chengdu has been fairly inconsistent, even in the melee they lost to Philadelphia after beating Shanghai. While they are entertaining to watch, I think consistency is a big factor in power rankings. If the meta stays the same, they are likely better than Dallas. But Dallas are better at a greater number of meters than Chengdu in my humble opinion. But that's not to discredit Chengdu. Ganine and Lutyang are crazy, Leave is honestly an MVP frontrunner, and Jinmu has really popped off, and Nisha and Monk are crazy as always. It's hard to find a weakness in their roster. Other than the 2 champs, these guys are easily the best in the world right now, but their inconsistency with other comps worries me. It'll have to be seen how much the hero bans affect them, but it's not seeming like it will that much. Number 2. Dallas Fuel. Dallas doesn't really need an introduction. By far the most successful team in they have a roster full of MVP caliber players, and have gone to Hawaii 3 times and won once. They seem unbeatable, unless they are facing Chengdu or Shanghai, of course. Yeah, they looked pretty weak last tournament. While they should still dominate I am a bit worried about how it will affect their mentals. Best case they actually learn how to counter ball comms, worst they let the losses get to them. Time will tell, but there is no reason to think they aren't by far the best team in right now. 1. Shanghai Dragons. No explanation needed really. Best DPS in the league, best supports in the league, top 3 tank duos. 2-time champions. Dropped a total of 1 map in the regular season last stage. Their dominance is simply too much. I feel for the other APAC teams, even Chengdu can barely touch Shanghai. Shanghai is easily the most likely team to win the season right now. Let's see if they get unlucky again. Thanks for watching. I'm trying to get to 100 subscribers by next season, so any subscription helps. Thanks.